Primarily, the idea is to get to people who can't get to meetings. So we're trying to get into the penitentiaries, into treatment centers, that kind of thing, and this content's being received by them. So bear with us. So you're a part of their recovery. Okay. Who's never been to position neutrality before? Anybody? Few of you? Good. Jay? Okay. Just so you know, what we do here, we take a look at the suggested instructions for a step or so a week directly out of this book, and we use this book in Crystal Meth Anonymous. Why? Because it works. The process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work with addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances. So what we do here, we call it a study, but really what it is a sharing. I'm going to show you how I find my experience in the book. I'm going to encourage you to have your experience. And if we both do our job, we'll share a spiritual experience in here tonight. Fair enough? Yeah. And tonight we're in the first step of action, which is? 4. Step 4. So let's get right into the book. Let's go to page 63 of our book, those of you who are following along. It's always a good idea to have your own book at a book study because it's never a good idea to let someone else read your book for you. How many of you went to the dope house, paid your money, and said, let them smoke it and tell me how it feels? This is a book of experience. We want you to have your experience so it helps to follow. Does it make sense? Let's see what it means. Okay, so we're at the bottom of page 63. The authors are going to tell us something of their experience. They said, next we launched out on a course of vigorous action. So the first thing I'd call to your attention is, who is we in this book? The first 100. It's important that we know when they say we in here, they're talking about the first 100 who recovered because they're detailing their experience. How many would you describe your first attempt at a 4-step as something less than a launching? Interesting, isn't it? Is it possible they had power to launch that you had not yet been introduced to when someone tried to drag you through the steps? Step 2 is an experience of power, which empowers a decision. If we don't encounter power in 2, we may not have the power to enact a decision. I'm not here telling you your experience, I'm just telling you what happened to me. Okay, so the first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it can have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. So what are those things in ourselves which have been blocking us? When did they talk to us about that? Yeah, well, they told us in the whole chapter, we agnostics, correct? They told us that deep down inside every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Yes? So then we have to ask, where do our ideas come from? My mind, where are the main problem centers. So clearly they weren't talking about my idea, they were talking about this powers idea. They said that idea was obscured by calamity, pomp, and worship. Yes? So sometimes they had to search fearlessly, but he was there. Then they talked about a reality behind the power. So they found purpose, and then they found power to carry it out within them. Any of you ever had that experience? When someone told you you could be uniquely useful to someone else, properly armed with the facts about yourself, and you doubted them, but then you went out and you actually proved to yourself that power through you. Kind of true, isn't it? Okay. So, then it goes on to tell us that therefore we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It's an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. Sorry I read so much, but we have to get through that and then go back and deconstruct it so we know what they said, right? Because there's a lot of instruction in there, sort of subtle. Did you catch it? So the first thing they said is the search was for what?
Unsaleable goods.
Well, the truth about me. I think a lot of people have come to believe this is about unsaleable goods, but that's just the shit in the way of the great reality I'm trying to uncover. This is a treasure hunt, not a crap hunt. It helps to know that. You see all of that shit, they got to be a pony in there. Okay, so, right? And then they said, we're going to get to the truth, and then they said one object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods. So we definitely got to get to the, but that's just one. The main idea is to get to the great reality. Because once I get the purpose and the power, then I'm going to walk in the victory. Does that make sense? Okay, so, and that's what they witnessed to. That's what we're trying to uncover it within ourselves, yes? Okay, how many of you discovered that there is a difference between other people's truth about you, your truth about you, and the truth about you? Okay, so we're just trying to narrow the gap so you can be an authentic you, become a better version of you, right? Okay. All right, so we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestation. So how many of you have taken a look at the common manifestations? How many of you like to use their words in their format so you can figure out what they were? I've seen lots of formats, but sometimes what they do is really simple, right? Okay. When did we say we were convinced that self-manifested in various ways is what had defeated us? That was the first thing, the first part of the third step, right? We had to be convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. And everyone always says, I'm convinced. But then we think, I'm convinced based on my experience, not, right? But it's a bigger, any life. I've got to quit judging the way I am thinking and feeling by the way I see you act or hear you speak. Or I will always be imprisoned in me. Yes? This idea of getting free of my thoughts about me so I can focus on thinking about you and be an authentic me, a better version of me on a growing basis. Yes? Okay. So, resentment is the #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. What's it? Resentment. Have you ever considered why resentment destroys more alcoholics? Do you think my resentment at you destroys you? No, my resentment at you blocks my consciousness of the power to live. Which would explain why it destroys more alcoholics, yes? Okay. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease, for we've not only been mentally and physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. What's it look like to see someone spiritually sick? The doctor said we would be restless, irritable, and discontent. Sometimes we can see it, sometimes we isolate within ourselves, but we ourselves know when we're restless, irritable, and discontent. And then usually someone says, why are you so cranky? I'm not cranky. Yeah? Okay. All right. So when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So what would we want to do then? We probably might want to dig into what this whole spiritual malady thing is about. You guys get it? How many of you come in here without a good belief, a good grounding in this power? Many of us do. Half the original fellowship were atheists or agnostics. So what we have to understand is what the process teaches us is the world does not cause how we think and feel, it reflects how we think and feel. The same thing that made me happy yesterday will piss me off today based on my perspective, yes? And I paint that. Any of you ever wake up just in a shitty place and you just went out through the whole day looking for the motherfucker who did it? And anyone will do, right? Okay. So if I'm having a shitty time in creation, I need to check in with Creator. Fair enough? Okay. All right, so in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is get the truth on paper. The resentments I hold. How many of you got here and you told the person working with you, I'm not mad at anyone, I'm just mad at me? I don't know how many, I mean, no one ever cops to it, but I heard it lots of times. How many of you working with people have heard that? I'm not mad at anyone, just mad at me. Okay, well, let's you and I do the relationship inventory first. We'll work our way back to resentment. Okay. All right, so we listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we are angry. We ask ourselves why we are angry. So that's not too tough a standard, right? If I know what's got me angry, then why am I angry? And get it on paper. Yeah? All right? In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. Do you relate to that, even if you wouldn't use those words? When people try and get in your pocket, or your significant other, or kind of get you restless? Burned up. On our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations which have been interfered with? So those are all pretty self-explanatory. The self-esteem is the idea I want to hold about me. Have you ever had the idea you want to hold about you fluctuate? Like depending on the crowd you walked into? You ever felt like you were beneath something and you walked in? You ever felt like you were above something when you walked in? So anytime I think those people are affecting how I think about me, I may cop a resentment toward them. Does it make sense? Okay. Our security, that's for housing, relational, whatever, right? Our ambitions, that one's kind of tricky. Our ambitions are our desires for a future outcome. How many of you haven't been able to find any happiness for others' success because you figure they stole yours somehow? Because it's a lonely existence if that's how we're living, and many of us have lived that way. Right? We don't, because we're out trying to arrange the lights, scenery, and the ballet, so we're not playing our part. People get promoted past us, and they've got to be a son of a bitch for it, right? Or whatever. No? I'm the only motherfucker that did that? Okay. All right, so our personal or sex relations have been interfered. We were definitely, or we usually as definite as this example. I'm going to jump back to the bottom of the page. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. Why? How do we find this power? Sometimes we have to search for it. Let's see, whose story am I trying to tell? Mine. I need to learn to retell this story as a victor rather than a victim. It only benefits me to be thorough and honest. Regardless of what I went through, my standing here proves to me and anyone watching I got 100% success getting through shit. Yes? Yes. And that's the same on the first day sober as it is many years sober, right? So many times we got to remind ourselves of that. Okay? All right, so when we were finished, we considered it carefully. Why would I want to do that? I want to make sure I'm telling the story the way I want to tell the story. The whole rest of my life is going to be bearing witness to the victories this power enables. So I want to tell the story as well as I can, although my revelations come as I go along. Anyone know what I'm talking about? How many of you have realized you're part of a much bigger plan that you were unaware of? So, yeah, okay. Okay, so the first thing apparent was that this world and its people were often quite wrong. How many of you discovered that? How many of you figured that out today? Yeah. So that doesn't go away. This is why it's a manner of living, not a workbook exercise. This is about a conscious walk, not something we complete. Does it make sense to you? Okay, so to conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. You ever had that happen? Do you realize that the soreness is emanating from here, and I'm painting it on everything? We live out our life in our thought life, not on the physical plane. That's why no one can really see themselves. We always see our thoughts, and we think we're seeing something else. That's why I'm pretty sure y'all are selfish when I'm looking through the lens of my thoughts. No? You've never had that happen? Okay. So sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore at ourselves, but the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. Have you ever had that happen? This is not good to think this way. You ever tell yourself that? I shouldn't think this way. Have you ever had anyone else tell you shouldn't think that way? Was it helpful? No. We're going to have to ask for power from within, change my perspective, and I'm going to have to participate. Think of others and what I can do to meet their needs, yes? Okay. All right, so our moments of triumph were short-lived. It's plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. Now, this book is written in past tense. If you've never done an inventory, it may not be plain to you. If you haven't taken people through the steps and seen your old ideas presented to you through them, it may not be plain to you. The reason you got to get that it's a manner of living is that you may not have the step experience until you've taken somebody through their 2 or 3 or 5. Okay. All right, so to the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile? Did you know that you were permitting that futility and unhappiness you were experiencing? None of us do. That's sort of that's the delusion they're talking about. And that happens for people that are not in rooms of recovery too. The Eagles wrote a song, right? So oftentimes it happens that we live our life in chains and we never even know we have the key. What the hell do you think they're talking about? The truth about me as opposed to my perceived experience. Yes? Okay. So, but with the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. So if you concluded that you are an addict of the hopeless variety, an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, the rest of the world may continue on this course. It wouldn't be terribly safe for you and the people that hang out with you if you do. Does that make sense? So we found that it's fatal, for when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. So how many of you were living pretty joyfully, then copped a resentment of some kind, and your anger kept you in a thought spiral? And you didn't want to be in the thought spiral. So we can see that their experience is valid, yes? Okay. Okay, and with us to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. How many of you have had experiences of being free of anger? Have you noticed that it's fleeting? Yes. Again, a conscious walk, right? Okay. All right, so the grouch and the brainstorm were not for us, so that they're first starting to tell us how we seed the anger we experience. So what does grouch mean? About what it sounds like, just walking around kind of grumbling. You ever been that guy, or you met the guy that you say, "Hey, how are you doing today?" "Okay, for Monday." Like, dude, there's one coming every 7 days. You got to get a grip. Right? My existence isn't predicated on the day of the week. Or better not be. Yes? Okay, so that's not a good way for us if we belong here. What's the brainstorm? The brainstorm may be that bright idea where I suddenly launch out on a course of vigorous action without duly considering the implications. Any of you ever do that?
Never.
Or I might think I'm all chill and just go off because some old idea presents itself manifested by my thoughts of you, and I just rage. You ever had that happen? Any of you ever had somebody come in and just the fact that they walked into the room, you were pretty sure they did it to offend you? Okay. That kind of stuff gets us in, that's not for us. Okay. Okay. What did I do here? Now I've lost what I did. Okay. Free of anger, but I can't find where I was on the page. There we are. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. So we share that. Remember, we're treating a human condition here, not an addicted condition. But when we have an addiction on top of our human condition, it's infinitely grave. So for the rest of the world, they can do whatever they bloody well want. It's dubious, but knock your socks off. For me, it's going to be a problem. Okay. So we turn back to the key for it held, or the list for it held the key to the future. So what's the key to the future? Sure, it holds the list holds the key, and the key is the truth about me. Yes? Properly armed with the facts about himself, he can win the confidence of another in a few hours. Okay. All right. So we're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. How many of you have had that experience? You thought you had everything under control, and then nobody was doing what you told them. They're all in it to get us. Okay. All right, so we began to see that the world and its people really dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. How could we escape? So think about that. How much do you imagine the wrongdoing of others is fancied? Do you think anyone thinks of you as often as you think of you? Probably not. They probably think of them. So a lot of what's going on wasn't personal. I made it personal. So probably 90+% is fancy. What about the stuff that's real? Any of you ever feel really empowered? Because this is real. They really did mistreat me. That's got the power to kill me too. So again, separating fly shit from pepper. Maybe an interesting exercise, but you want to eat from either pile. Right? Okay. All right. Don't sit in your resentment because the target doesn't suffer, you do. That's just what it is. Unforgiveness kills you, not them. Fair enough? Okay. All right, so we saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? They got question marks, so if you're following along, that's the instruction. Okay, I'm buying it so far, but how am I going to master them? Right? Isn't that the question? Because we're going inward, okay? We could not wish them away any more than alcohol. So now they told you what they tried first. What did they try first? I tried to wish away my resentments. Anyone ever else try to wish away your resentment? And we think they're gone, and we're really happy they're gone until someone reminds us they're not gone. Right? Because that's why we're going to come to believe in a power greater than ourselves, because the power will change our mind to the precise extent that we focus on others and how to meet their needs. Yes? Okay. So this was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. That would help, right? Okay. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way these disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. So what are their symptoms? Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Right? The problem with that is their symptoms are the same as mine. And I'm going to see them through the lens of my thoughts. So I don't know if I'm seeing theirs or mine. So I'm going to learn to discipline my thought life so that I can separate the symptoms from the person so I can see how to help. And that's the purpose of the inventory. That's the key to successful relationship. Got me? Okay. Okay, so we ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. So when they talk about God in here, they've introduced us to what they mean by God. What do they mean? Power, peace, happiness, and a sense of direction flowing into you. So you're asking tangible power to empower you to be kinder than you feel like being, to tolerate the intolerable, to love the unlovely. How many of you have done that or got that kind of power simply by reminding yourself, okay, they're sick, I'm not going off on them. Anyone's ever worked with it, one of us, has had the experience of wanting to choke them and instead said, how can I help you? Okay, I understand you're disturbed. Right? Okay. So when a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man, how can I be helpful to him? So I'm always summoning the power. What's the first step in recovery? We learned we had to fully concede to our innermost self. I can't see what you need, but he knows what you need. He's put me here to provide it. Does that make sense? Okay. Thy will be done. So in this, if you don't talk in King James language, we might want to just break down, for their purposes, what is God's will. Whatever's going on. So I need to be informed now why I'm seeing this. Yes? Not the selfish reason I'm supposing. Why am I seeing this? How can I be helpful? Yes? Yes. Okay. We avoid retaliation or argument. So how many of you have had the experience of offering yourself to somebody and then they told you something you found offensive? Yeah? And so there really is power involved in avoiding retaliation or argument, because did we come to help or not? Is it transactional or is it selfless? You know what I'm talking about? The difference between transactional and selfless? When I get there and I have an expectation of how you're going to behave, I've got a resentment under construction. Because you may not respond the way I thought you should. In fact, if I meet you in here, you probably will not. True? Okay. Okay, so that we wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. How many of you learned that by trying to help people and then going off, and then you chase them off? We do. That's how we grow, right? Okay. And we realize that our own remorse for that is a sign of growth in us. Yes? Right. I mean, we're guaranteed a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, regardless of what side of the table we're on. How many of you have grown in the way you treated people as a result of treating people badly and feeling remorse? Of course we do. But at least we didn't used to feel remorseful at all, so that's growth, right? Just had a can of fuck 'em, right? We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. So that's a promise. Claim that. Regardless of your theology, if you will do what they suggest and ask for power, you will at least be able to take a kind and tolerant view of each and every one, which means you won't go off on them, and so you won't have an amends to make. You may still be mad, you may have to go talk to another, but at least there won't be as much wreckage. We live in a world of action-reaction. If you react, there's another reaction. Always. Okay? So referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others have done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. What do they mean by resolutely? How many of you can remember that first, well, searching and fearless? Yes. But you remember your first inventory where you wrote it all down, you were still really pissed, and whoever was helping you was trying to direct your attention to your part, and you go, I have no part. We're going to have to focus. I better have a part, because I'm suffering in my thought life, not theirs. Does that make sense? Okay. So I got to find it. I got to resolutely focus. What is my part? I may not be responsible for what happened, but I am responsible for my unforgiveness if that's all that's left, and there may be a bigger part. Okay. So where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? See how they're helping me chase it down? See the order they put it in? I find myself in a selfish condition. I'm disappointed in you. But before that happened, I lied to me. Because it's not outward dishonesty, it's inward dishonesty. You deserved it, I deserved it, something caused that. And it all started with self-seeking behavior I didn't even know I was engaged with. You ever had that happen? You got out to help someone, and they didn't respond with the gratitude that you assumed they should? So that was self-seeking behavior. You didn't know it. It was delusional. You thought you were being selfless. And then you lied, well, I'll just tune them up. You ever had that happen? I've heard people tune people up at meetings. And okay, so how did that help? Right? And then all of a sudden I find myself in this, I'm unappreciated. They don't appreciate it. Anyone know that's never happened to you? Boy, I got in the wrong room. Anyway, all of that was driven by fear. And so what I need to do is chase it back and realize what my part is. And I know the way I respond to fear, and as I get to know myself better, I'll know more and more what my thoughts are telling me about the fear I'm experiencing. Yes? Okay, so then it says, though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other man's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. So when I get to the truth, then they say I'll be willing. Not that it might happen or whatever. I will be willing to set them straight because I do see my part, and I know that the benefit of setting these matters straight is I get more fit spiritually. Right? The amend step is the fitness step. Okay, so notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our life. How many of you never thought you experienced fear, but you thought you might be a little selfish? How many of you thought, well, I'm fear-based, but I'm not selfish. I always think of others first. Same person, different coat. Right? It's all driven by fear, but if you don't like the word, you may like one over the other. But fear drives it all. Does that make sense? And so what they tell us is that it's an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve, but did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? So I got to go inward and ask if in fact sometimes I just want you to like me and I don't even know why I want you to like me. You're not even someone I like liking me. Ever had that happen? Oh, yeah. So then I hear what you say and I think maybe I could act in a way to make you like me. You ever do that? Well, now I'm acting in a way that is inauthentic to me. You still don't like me, and now I don't like me. That ever happened to anybody? Yeah. Okay, so I set that ball rolling. Instead of just presenting you who I was, and you do with it what you will. That doesn't mean be a dick, it means be authentic, right? Okay. But did we not ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. You get where they did that? How many of you have had stuff stolen from you because of your fear to move forward? Just you wanted to start a business or whatever, but what if I did? And if I did this, what would happen? Anyone ever wanted to go back to school? Any of those types of things, and we don't do it because of some fear that blocks us? How many of you had a hard time in relationships because you'd never commit? How many of you have had problems with children or something like that? And you did a good job parenting, but now as they grow up and want to express themselves, you're like, is that right? Okay, so these are the things. It steals our relationships. It steals our joy. Does it make sense? Okay. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. Did you know you had fears that had no resentment in connection with them? Yeah. Where's my people that have suffered depression? That's anger without enthusiasm. Not trying to make light. It isn't fun, is it? You guys that have had it. Right? I'm angry, I don't know why, and I don't feel like doing anything about it. We ask ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? So are you judging your future based on some past mistakes or past interactions? Because you've been introduced to new power. So there's no reason to believe that what's happened in the past is going to happen going forward. And even if it does, did you not survive it? Does it make sense? Okay. So self-reliance was as good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. So they're clearly talking to me now about the main problem is fear. Right? And it's going to cause manifestations of self. And it's going to cause me to fight or flight. Yeah? So they're talking very clearly. How many of you have had great self-confidence and then came in and you thought as an act of humility you had to not express who you really were? Some of us sit in shit jobs, do things. We could go out and do something again, but because we tore it up so bad, we don't go try again. Okay. Perhaps there's a better way. We think so, for we're now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. You got to get this, guys. If you're not religious, those words bother you, that by this time, they've introduced you to God. To you means power from within. Power, peace, happiness, sense of direction. I trust and rely upon this power, this tangible power I've been introduced to, and I'm going to follow its guidance. Yes? Okay. So we trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We're in the world to play the role He assigned. So how many of you would have to admit that it does seem at times that we've been given a rather shitty assignment? Nonetheless, who's better to play that role that is you than you? As shitty a role as you have, you are probably the best prepared person to play it. Yes? And the whole idea of playing the role you've been assigned is to become a better version of you. And since you don't know what's coming, it's good that you were properly prepared before. True? So what you thought was a wasted life was preparing you for a purposeful life. Move through the process. Fair enough? Okay? Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. So what does it tell me I'm relying on? Power within. Right? And then that power is going to enable me to match calamity with serenity. The same way that getting high, it enabled me to match calamity with serenity. Because this is spiritual inebriation. It's not abstinence. That's what people need to get. We're trying to get power and peace flowing through us so that we live comfortably, right? How many of you could sit there with the friggin' house burning down as long as you had enough dope? Meet calamity with serenity, right? That's why I got a shed. Drink. There you go. Okay. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it's the way of strength. We're laughing at the idea that because I know who I was when I wasn't who I am. Anyone know what I'm talking about? I mean, regardless, we clean up pretty good around here and reasonably fast. But if anyone had any idea what we looked like on the first day or days, they'd go, that is a miracle. Right? Okay. All right. Okay, so paradoxically, it's the way of strength. The verdict of the ages is that faith means courage. So faith to us is courage. Faith is how we overcome our control addiction. We do not treat an addiction to chemical here. That's a symptom. What we really have is a control addiction. And the only substance in the known universe powerful enough to overcome control addiction is faith. All is well. All is as it should be. All is as it is. All the time. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So they trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. So you guys, if you're having trouble saying, what do I do, what do I do, and you're not getting it in your constant walk, it's because you're not the doer. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. See, you're a being. So all you need to know is the being to operate in, and the doer will work through you. How many of you have had that experience? You'll really experience it when we work with others. Yeah. Things come out of you that you didn't even know were in you. In fact, they probably weren't. They probably just flowed through. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so at once we commenced to outgrow fear. Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there, but above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes. Absurd extremes, perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, the base necessity of procreation. And then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it or isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. One school would allow a man no flavor for his fare, the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. We want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. Why did they say that 3 times, 3 different ways? They already told us that we have problems when we perceive anything like that going on. And none of us are any good at it, and we don't know what we're looking at, whether we're looking at their behavior or my thoughts. But I know I'm suffering right now from my thoughts. So I don't want to have to watch your actions. What I want to do is watch my thoughts. Does that make sense? Okay. So we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where have we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? So this is your 10-step for a lifetime. You'll find it on page 69, where we talk to you about sex. Because alcoholics are not without a sense of humor. So in the middle of page 69, you will find there's a paragraph that you want to ask yourself these questions. You'll know what questions to ask yourself. They got question marks after them. That make sense? Okay. So whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? So we're always going to process through the you did it, and I didn't deserve it, and move what should I have done instead? Because that's the only thing I might have any potential to get away with, right? Okay. So we got this all down on paper and looked at it. How did I learn to treat people in relationships? I probably got someone else's ideas of how to treat people in relationships. Wouldn't it be good to get an authentic set of ideas based on your experience of how you'd like to treat people going forward? Because this really isn't about just a sex inventory. It's about our relationship with creation is our relationship with Creator. If we're having trouble in creation, check in with Creator. So why not get a sane and sound ideal for my future relationships? I don't know why anyone doesn't want to do an inventory if they know what it's about, what it's for. Okay? In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. How many of you want a future sex life? Everybody lies except like 6 every time. How about a sane and sound ideal for a future sex life? More hands?
Definitely not a reason to have for that one.
We subjected each relation to this test, was it selfish or not? So really, if you don't like the word selfish, it goes back into very old teaching. How would I like to be treated if the roles were reversed? If you're in doubt about what you're about to do, would I like this done to me? If the answer is yes, go forth and multiply. And if the answer is no, you might want to consider. Does it make sense? Okay. So we ask God to mold our ideals and to help us live up to them. And we remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. So It's not going to do you any good to hate behaviors and what have you, because it's only your thoughts that are causing your problem anyway. Let's move past it. Let's show love and compassion. Let's see what happens. This power changes our nature if we will allow it to, but only as instruments. We don't do anything consciously. We do it while we're focused on others, and the change goes through us. Does that make sense? Okay. So whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. I've heard people teach that as a rule, but they've told us the book is suggestive. So I suggest to you, they're not talking about you must as in you must. They're talking about, oh, you must. Why would you go to all this trouble and not want to finish? So it's kind of a no-brainer must, not a you must. Got me? This isn't legalism. This is a no, I want to be a better version of me. I refuse to let fear stand in the way of me becoming a better version of me. I've got to discipline these fears. Does that make sense, what we're talking about? Okay. So we must be willing to make amends where we've done harm. Same thing. Why would I want to make amends where I've done harm? Because in the making of amends, I get free of me. I get free of my limiting thoughts about me and become a better version of me. And in that process, I teach myself that there is a power in me that can treat people kinder than I feel like treating them. How many of you went to make amends and you're still pretty sure they were jerks, but you were able to treat them decent? So you had no more apologies to make. What is that but a power greater than you operating through you? Did you not get fit? Did you start finding as you grew that things other people told you should be mad about, you didn't have any anger about? That does happen. It's like, you should be angry. Really? I don't want to be. Okay. All right, so in other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. So that's where they're telling you the truth. It never was about sex. It's about relationships in general. Most of our ideas about every relationship we learned before we even knew we were learning them. Yeah? And anyway, do you guys not get that? When I used to take people through the steps in a lot of the halfway houses, they would keep their money until they were paid current. And I'd have guys call me and say, hey, I'm going to get a paycheck this week. I'm finally current. Will you hold my money? And I'm afraid I'm going to get high. I said, no, but I'll help you inventory your money, because right now, your higher power is money. Did you ever get high when you didn't have money? Oh, hell yeah. Did you get high when you did have money? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, that money got nothing to do with your sobriety. You know what I'm saying? Okay. All right, so in meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. So if I'm going to ask in meditation, now we're talking discourse. So any other form of meditation is fine, but AA meditation, as you'll talk about when we get to 10, is a conscious walk. It's not sitting somewhere quiet. It's on the fly as I go along. We got to get that, guys. This is not a workbook exercise. It's how I discipline my thought, because otherwise, when I meet you and I'm asleep, I'm going to react to my perceptions about how you're behaving. And that's infinitely grave for me, particularly if I carry it along with me. Yes? You notice how Eckhart Tolle talks about the two ducks, the Zen masters. They're swimming across the pond, they bump into each other, and they flap their wings and quack, quack, quack. Then they swim away peacefully. Humans, we have that interaction. We don't swim away peacefully. That fucking duck, right? Probably for days, right? So, get your Zen from the ducks. Okay. So then it says, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. So what if we don't want it? Because that's promising condition. How many of you discovered the answer does come? The right answer does come, but if I don't want it, it does not get employed. So they're just telling us, look, if you want it, but this won't work unless I honestly want to and I'm willing to make the effort. Okay. So God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. You ever worried about that? How many of you got here and thought you had to do everything perfect? How many of you didn't even know you thought you had to do everything perfect, but part of your problem with doing something new was because you knew you might not do it perfect? Yeah, sometimes that gets revealed to us, yeah? Okay, so does this mean we're going to get drunk? How many of you have done something in your recovery and someone said, oh, you're going to get high? You did. Because we hear that kind of stuff. It really doesn't have anything to do with their opinion of me. It has to do with my opinion of me and whether I'm growing in a relationship, right? Because all of us hose it, guys. All of us hose it. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but that's only a half-truth. I only call your attention because it's just a book of experience. So if you've had that experience, don't be mad at them. This book isn't for them anyway. This book is for you or for me. If I do what these people suggest, it won't trouble me what you do. End of story. And if I don't get free of my thoughts about you, I'm going to have a problem. Okay? All right, so it depends on us and our motives. If we're sorry for what we've done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we'll be forgiven and we'll have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. You've got to get that the book is called Alcoholics Anonymous, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered. Not recovering, have recovered. And why does that matter? Because it wasn't a medical diagnosis then, so it has nothing to do with a medical recovery. It has to do with a mining term, to take from a scrap heap and place at a level of life better than the best I've ever known, to extract from what was thought waste something infinitely valuable. They've told you clearly what the experience of being recovered is, and they use the word recovered 17 times in the instructions, and they say recovering only twice in the chapter to the wives about the still drinking alcoholic. So it's not an argument, it's an experience of redemption. That regardless of what I've gone through, does it make sense? Sometimes that takes a minute. Okay, so some of these people, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered, this is their witness. If I'm not experiencing what they did, it's not because they're lying, and it's not because it's not true, it's because they already told me. Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. If I didn't thoroughly follow their path, I might want to look and see where I misstepped rather than rewrite the book. Does it make sense? Okay. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into working or into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. How many of you have found you had to work harder with other people when you were new? How many of you got into trouble while you've been around a while and had to go out and work with a whole bunch more? How many of you found that those people found you? You didn't even have to go looking for them. It's like, we think God doesn't exist, but all of a sudden, the minute I'm feeling restless, somebody's there wanting help. Anyone had that experience? Okay. If we've been thorough about our personal inventory, we've written down a lot. We've listed and analyzed our resentments, and we've begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness, and we've begun to learn tolerance, patience, goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look upon them as sick people. So I'm not going to go any further, but I want you to see how they're talking about beginnings. The 10th step is simply that discipline for a lifetime. Instead of putting it on paper, I quit encoding it in my brain. I discipline the thoughts. So the practice we learn here, we're going to become disciplined in later. Does it make sense? This is a beginning, and then we're going to get a life of a conscious walk. Okay, we'll talk next week. Thanks.